Hi, it's Rick Prescott here to talk about my book, Save the Beatles, the Rescued Albums, 1970 to 1982. And I want to talk about some simple concepts that go into how the book has come together. And the first of those is, what is a fused album? On the cover, I call it a rescued album because that's sort of the action that takes place in the book. But the finished product is what I call a fused album, which means you take solo tracks from the Beatles and you put them together in such a way that each elevates the others around it, and the collection ends up sounding as close to as possible like the Beatles, but built from solo tracks. This separates it from things like just a playlist or a mixtape or something like that, which many people put together. There's nothing wrong with that. Those are fun to do. I've done that. But a fused album is something different because a fused album takes the concepts that George Martin used to create albums and builds the albums from that, rather than a simple collection of tracks that you like. Now, hopefully they are also tracks that you like, but the interesting thing is that a fused album has the ability to take tracks which maybe you don't like or you don't know or are, somewhere far down the list of generally acknowledged favorites from the solo Beatles, and suddenly they sound different. Suddenly they sound better, and suddenly they sound like they actually are part of a group project, which is the whole goal of this of the book and the project to rescue the albums. And that is to take tracks that maybe are otherwise going to disappear, tracks that fit best into the idea of a Beatles album in the 70s, and then fuse them together. And that's drawn actually from the idea of the Beatles continuing their career after 1970 as fused independent artists, which is to say each of them records separately with whomever they want, wherever, whenever, whatever, anything goes. And then at specific points, they bring those together, they bring the recordings together, give them to an assembler, just as they did with George Martin on their early albums or with Phil Spector on Let It Be. And that assembler takes those, figures out like a puzzle, putting them together like a puzzle to make sure that the strongest tracks are in the right places, that weaker tracks are selected carefully so that they sound better when they're put next to the better tracks. And by that process, that is fusing solo tracks into a coherent album that the Beatles might have released in the 70s. Now, obviously, fused albums are speculative. Fused albums are really just a thought experiment. But the great thing about it is that you can actually create them. Once you understand the principles, you can create them using the same methods that I used, and you might come up with different ideas than I did. And then you can listen to them and see, does it work? Does it sound like the Beatles? The strange thing is that I made 7 albums this way based on solo tracks from between 1970 and 1983, which is using the last of the Double Fantasy sessions from the Milk and Honey album. And 2 of those 7 albums are double albums. And rather than sound like a mixtape or sound like just a random compilation, or a playlist, even just an algorithm-generated playlist, they sound like a Beatles album, or what I call a meta-Beatles album, because they take individual tracks. By putting them together, each strengthens the others, each makes the others sound better. That's what a fused album is. The process of how to create a fused album is laid out plainly in the book, and it's all based on the principles that George Martin used to create the original classic Beatles albums, which are documented extensively. So, thanks for watching. Please consider picking up the book, Save the Beatles, the Rescued Albums, 1970 to 1982, savethebeatles.com, and you can find all the links there. Thanks again.